to move on from Turner and persuaded the Suns to let him leave. Phoenix was not interested in doing so, instead choosing to match the offer sheet immediately and keep Ayton. The Indiana Pacers were close to snatching DeAndre Ayton away from the Phoenix Suns. It would have given the Pacers a skilled, young center to pair with Tyrese Halliburton and possibly led to a Miles Turner trade coming to fruition. Phoenix put the kibosh on those plans, though. The Pacers could have tried to work out a sign-and trade that sent Turner, and possibly other players, to the Suns. This would have finally allowed them to move on from Turner and persuaded the Suns to let him leave. Phoenix was not interested in doing so, instead choosing to match the offer sheet immediately and keep Ayton. Now, Indiana still has Turner. The 26-year-old has been on the trade block for a while now. It doesn't seem like he's bound to move after watching Malcolm Brogdon get traded to the Boston Celtics. He is the last remaining piece of their playoff core. The time has never been more appropriate to trade him, even though Ayton isn't coming to Indiana. If the Pacers didn't have many options behind Turner, it might make more sense to keep him for a portion of the season. However, that is not the case. The team has several big men who should get playing time not only because they are young but because they have shown some potential. The Pacers have second-year big man Isaiah Jackson, mid-season trade acquisition Jalen Smith and 2019 first-round pick Goga Bitadze. Each of them is younger than 23 years old and could be a solid player to build around. Jackson is just 20 years old and has the makings of a solid shot blocker and lob finisher. Smith shot 37.3% from the three-point territory after being traded to Indiana last season. Bitadze may be the odd one out, especially with his contract also set to expire, but has shown some promise as a shot blocker. Indiana should find as much playing time for each of them as possible. The urgency to trade Turner is growing because his contract is going to expire after this season. The Pacers have opted not to move on from Turner plenty of times. They are running out of road to kick the can down. The Pacers can still wait until the trade deadline to move Turner. Teams may be more active in talks about him at that time. However, the Pacers won't have as much leverage to trade him later on. Also, they would be wise to open up playing time for Jackson, Smith, and Bitadze sooner. It's in their best interest to trade him this offseason. Turner is making $17.5 million this season. The Pacers should not have much of a problem finding a team who can accommodate a trade for a contract of that size. Despite a flurry of rumors at the trade deadline, Turner was not traded, partly due to a foot injury. Now that he is healthy, there should be plenty of teams interested in adding him. Plenty of teams spent this offseason looking for centers. With their options bare, Turner could be the best one up for grabs at the moment. The Charlotte Hornets could look to add Turner and use first-round pick Mark Williams as a backup. The Brooklyn Nets could add him to their center rotation, too. Even if it's too late for the Pacers to get back something of real value for Miles Turner, it's in their best interest to move on. They have enough young talent to lean fully into a rebuild. The Indiana Pacers were close to snatching DeAndre Ayton away from the Phoenix Suns. It would have given the Pacers a skilled, young center to pair with Tyrese Halliburton and possibly led to a Miles Turner trade coming to fruition. Phoenix put the kibosh on those plans, though. The Pacers could have tried to work out a sign-and trade that sent Turner, and possibly other players, to the Suns. This would have finally allowed them to move on from Turner and persuaded the Suns to let him leave. Phoenix was not interested in doing so, instead choosing to match the offer sheet immediately and keep Ayton. The Indiana Pacers were close to snatching DeAndre Ayton away from the Phoenix Suns. It would have given the Pacers a skilled, young center to pair with Tyrese Halliburton and possibly led to a Miles Turner trade coming to fruition. Phoenix put the kibosh on those plans, though. The Pacers could have tried to work out a sign-and trade that sent Turner, and possibly other players, to the Suns. This would have finally allowed them to move on from Turner and persuaded the Suns to let him leave. Phoenix was not interested in doing so, instead choosing to match the offer sheet immediately and keep Ayton. Now, Indiana still has Turner. The 26-year-old has been on the trade block for a while now. It doesn't seem like he's bound to move after watching Malcolm Brogdon get traded to the Boston Celtics. He is the last remaining piece of their playoff core. The time has never been more appropriate to trade him, even though Ayton isn't coming to Indiana. If the Pacers didn't have many options behind Turner, it might make more sense to keep him for a portion of the season. However, that is not the case. The team has several big men who should get playing time not only because they are young but because they have shown some potential. The Pacers have second-year big man Isaiah Jackson, mid-season trade acquisition Jalen Smith and 2019 first-round pick Goga Bitadze. Each of them is younger than 23 years old and could be a solid player to build around. Jackson is just 20 years old and has the makings of a solid shot blocker and lob finisher. Smith shot 37.3% from the three-point territory after being traded to Indiana last season. Bitadze may be the odd one out, especially with his contract also set to expire, but has shown some promise as a shot blocker. Indiana should find as much playing time for each of them as possible. The urgency to trade Turner is growing because his contract is going to expire after this season. The Pacers have opted not to move on from Turner plenty of times. They are running out of road to kick the can down. The Pacers can still wait until the trade deadline to move Turner. Teams may be more active in talks about him at that time. However, the Pacers won't have as much leverage to trade him later on. Also, they would be wise to open up playing time for Jackson, Smith, and Bitadze sooner. It's in their best interest to trade him this offseason. Turner is making $17.5 million this season. The Pacers should not have much of a problem finding a team who can accommodate a trade for a contract of that size. Despite a flurry of rumors at the trade deadline, Turner was not traded, partly due to a foot injury. Now that he is healthy, there should be plenty of teams interested in adding him. Plenty of teams spent this offseason looking for centers. With their options bare, Turner could be the best one up for grabs at the moment. The Charlotte Hornets could look to add Turner and use first-round pick Mark Williams as a backup. The Brooklyn Nets could add him to their center rotation, too. Even if it's too late for the Pacers to get back something of real value for Miles Turner, it's in their best interest to move on. They have enough young talent to lean fully into a rebuild.
Aside from having salt rubbed in their wound on Tuesday with the official announcement of Jalen Brunson signing with the New York Knicks, the Dallas Mavericks offseason has been extremely quiet in recent weeks. So quiet, in fact, that superstar Luka Doncic is wondering when something else is going to happen. Dallas got off to a promising start by trading for Christian Wood and drafting Jaden Hardy, but the only significant move since then signing 34-year-old JaVale McGee to a 3-year deal is questionable, especially when considering that Dallas is preparing to start him at center with Wood coming off the bench. However, the silence could be broken soon if the Utah Jazz blow up the rest of their team by trading Donovan Mitchell. According to a report from ESPN, the Jazz are now open to discussing trade scenarios for Mitchell, after previously not wanting to entertain the idea. Although the Mavs would probably love the idea of getting their foot in the door for a Mitchell trade, the assets they have available are simply lacking when compared to what other teams can offer. That said, Dallas should be all in on the idea of picking up other pieces of Utah's roster, should Mitchell be traded elsewhere. More specifically, a trade for Mike Conley and Bojan Bogdanovic would be quite the offseason rebound from losing Brunson to New York. On today's episode of the Mavs Step Back podcast, I, Dalton Trick, was joined by my DallasBasketball.com colleague Grant Afseth to discuss that trade scenario at length, as well as other options Dallas could turn to this summer in the wake of a potential Kevin Durant trade, like Kyrie Irving, although the Mavs probably disagree with us there. You can listen to the entire discussion above, but here's what we think a Mavs Jazz trade involving Conley and Bogdanovic could look like. Mavs receive Mike Conley, Bojan Bogdanovic. Jazz receive Tim Hardaway Jr., Maxi Kleber, Dwight Powell, Josh Green. Although the Mavs love Maxi Kleber, who is a versatile 3-and-D big, including his expiring $9 million contract alongside Powell's $11 million expiring contract could be necessary to avoid having to send out any future first-round draft picks. Although Hardaway Jr.'s deal has 3 years remaining in comparison to Conley's having 2, Conley, 34 years old, is nearly 5 years older than Hardaway Jr. Separately, the Jazz could probably get a future first-round pick for Bogdanovic, but they'd likely have to give up one to shed Conley, who is guaranteed $24 million in the 2023-24 season. We'll see whether a team like the Washington Wizards, Indiana Pacers, San Antonio Spurs, or New Orleans Pelicans team goes after Conley. As for Bogdanovic, on an expiring deal, he could be a great asset to extract something in return before his pending free agency in 2023. With all the noise around Durant and Irving, it's unlikely we'll see a deal from the Jazz before the Nets figure out what to do with their 2 superstars. But preparing a deal centered around Bogdanovic, Conley, and the several newly acquired draft picks could be a package to get valuable assets in return. It's hard to predict Conley coming back this season, in light of the aggressive shopping the Jazz are doing, but nothing is a sure thing. The Jazz don't have to rush on any move, but they need to show Mitchell the path they're taking to get back to contention. If Conley stays and the deal isn't agreed upon, the Jazz must work on reevaluating his role with the team. At the twilight of his career, Conley has shown that he isn't the impactful starter he once was. If the Jazz are moving forward with Mitchell at the center, they need to let him lead their guard-heavy lineups. New head coach Will Hardy needs to space the floor offensively around Mitchell and play a switching defense that will allow players to stay in front of their man. Conley will need to take a back seat on this team if he stays, where he possibly comes off the bench and takes on more of a leadership role. The Jazz need to be more athletic, faster, and more versatile defensively. Conley and Bogdanovic are the next pieces that will need to be moved for that sake, and if staying, Hardy has a lot of work ahead of him to manage this retooled roster. The Sacramento Kings reshaped their roster this offseason. Not only did they utilize the 4th overall pick in the draft, but they also attacked free agency and the trade market. They drafted Keegan Murray, who has played extremely well in Summer League, signed Malik Monk in free agency, and traded for Kevin Durant in a deal with the Atlanta Hawks. Based on their actions, it's clear that they want to make a push for the playoffs, but at the same time, they're trying to prep for the future. With that in mind, one player who they could look to trade is Harrison Barnes. The veteran forward could easily fit in with this team, but if they want to trade him to get a bit younger, that could be a solid option too. Here are 3 NBA trades involving Barnes for the Kings to consider. Raptors receive Harrison Barnes, 2026 first-round pick, top 10 protected, 2028 first-round pick, lottery protected, 2023 second-round pick, 2025 second-round pick. Kings receive Anunoby. This trade needs to have an asterisk next to it because this deal would only get done if certain things happen. 1. The Raptors would have to not deal Anunoby for Kevin Durant or Donovan Mitchell, and 2. They would have to actually have an interest in trading him at all. If the rumors that Anunoby wants out of Toronto are true, then this deal would make sense for the Raptors. They would get a solid replacement, Barnes' money would be off the books at the end of the year, and they'd get ample draft compensation. As for the Kings, this trade would complete their new core in Sacramento. Anunoby would join De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis, Davion Mitchell, Murray, Huerter, and Monk to form the new Kings core. All of those players are extremely young, and Anunoby would fill in as a starting forward for years to come. Plus, with more freedom to work in Sacramento, he could develop even more. Hawks receive Harrison Barnes, Terrence Davis, 2026 first-round pick, 2028 first-round pick, lottery protected. Kings receive John Collins. The Hawks have been reportedly looking to trade Collins for almost 2 years at this point, and this deal could help them stay competitive this year, while also freeing up some room to work in the future. Atlanta just made a massive deal for Dejounte Murray this offseason, giving up a ton of first-round picks in the process. In this deal, they would be essentially recouping some of the picks they gave up. Meanwhile, Barnes is a good enough player to the point where they would still be a competitive team. In fact, his defensive versatility would be a huge help to the Hawks. Collins is obviously the better player, but since the Hawks are seemingly hell-bent on trading him, getting Barnes back would be a great replacement power forward. They would also get Davis in this deal, who could play some rotational minutes at the end of the bench for the Hawks, as they attempt to retool their roster. For the Kings, this would cement their young core for the future. The trio of Collins, De'Aaron Fox, and Domantas Sabonis would be one of the most intriguing in the NBA. Sacramento could roll out a starting lineup of Fox, Huerter, Keegan Murray, Collins, and Sabonis, with Malik Monk, Davion Mitchell, Richaun Holmes, and others coming off the bench. Heat receive Harrison Barnes. Kings receive Duncan Robinson, Haywood Highsmith, 2023 first-round pick, top 20 protected. This trade may seem a bit weird for both teams, but it actually makes a ton of sense. Both teams would be heading in different directions, but simultaneously, would both be trying to compete. For the Heat, this trade would see them replace PJ Tucker in the starting lineup. Barnes would be able to step in and start at power forward for the Heat. Barnes' versatile defensive game would help the Heat on that end, while his three-point shooting would help him fit in with them on the offensive side of the floor. Meanwhile, the Kings would be rounding out their roster a bit with this trade. They'd be getting added wing depth in the form of both Robinson and Highsmith. Robinson had a down year last season, but he still shot extremely well from three-point range. If he can have any sort of bounce-back season, this would be great value for the Kings. Highsmith is a great player to take a chance on too. He showed some great potential for the Heat last season, and has played alright in Summer League, and he would get even more chances in Sacramento. Lastly, they would be getting a first-round pick in this deal. The Kings could either make that pick and add another young player next year, or use the pick in a trade to improve their
The Brooklyn Nets face a huge dilemma regarding their two best players, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. When they got eliminated in the 2022 NBA playoffs, both Irving and Durant expressed their desire to return to the Nets in the 2022-23 NBA season. However, things dramatically changed after the Nets refused to give Irving a maximum contract extension. With the team's lack of interest in keeping Irving long-term in Brooklyn, Durant has decided to request a trade from the Nets. Among the teams that have expressed interest in engaging in a blockbuster deal with the Nets are the Toronto Raptors and the Los Angeles Lakers. After NBA executives Sean Marks, Masai Ujiri, and Rob Pelinka were seen having a conversation at the Summer League, some people started thinking that the Nets, Raptors, and the Lakers could be talking about a potential three-team trade featuring Durant and Irving. Here's what the hypothetical three-way deal could look like. Toronto Raptors receive Kevin Durant and Joe Harris. Los Angeles Lakers receive Kyrie Irving and Seth Curry. Brooklyn Nets receive Russell Westbrook, Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, Gary Trent Jr., Talen Horton-Tucker, a 2023 first-round pick, a 2025 first-round pick, a 2027 first-round pick, a 2028 first-round pick, two 2023 second-round picks, and a 2025 second-round pick. Giving up all those assets would be a tough decision for the Raptors, but it's something that they would strongly consider if they believe that Durant could help them win their second NBA championship title. Ujiri made a similar move in the summer of 2018 when they acquired Kawhi Leonard from the San Antonio Spurs. Though he only stayed for 1 year, Leonard helped the Raptors bring the first-ever Larry O'Brien Trophy to Toronto in the 2018-19 NBA season. Durant may already be 33, but when he's 100% healthy, he's still one of the best active players in the NBA. However, to have a realistic chance of achieving their main goal next season, the Raptors would still need to add a starting-caliber center who would complement their core of Durant, Harris, Scotty Barnes, and Fred VanVleet. Though it would cost them Horton-Tucker and 2 future draft assets, the proposed blockbuster trade should be a no-brainer for the Lakers. The suggested deal would enable them to reunite LeBron James with Irving while acquiring another quality backcourt starter in Curry. Despite his off-court issues, Irving would be a massive upgrade over Westbrook at the Lakers' starting point guard position, giving them another all-star who can efficiently knock down shots from beyond the arc and knows how to coexist with James on the court. Adding Irving and Curry to the core of James, Anthony Davis, and Thomas Bryant would undoubtedly strengthen the Lakers' chances of reclaiming their throne next year. For the Nets, the hypothetical three-team trade would enable them to remain competitive while setting themselves up for the future. Westbrook, Siakam, Trent Jr., Anunoby, and Horton-Tucker may not be able to fill the star power that the Nets would lose from trading Irving and Durant. Still, surrounding Ben Simmons with all those players could help them stay afloat in the Eastern Conference. If Westbrook proves to be an odd fit with Simmons, the Nets could simply let him walk away next summer and use the salary cap space to chase another big name in the 2023 NBA free agency. After 2 years of partnership, rumors are circulating that all-star small forward Kevin Durant and the Brooklyn Nets are heading into an inevitable divorce in the 2022 NBA offseason. Durant may have earlier committed to returning to the Nets in the 2022-23 NBA season. However, after they declined to give Kyrie Irving a massive contract extension, he changed his mind about staying and requested a trade from Brooklyn. Several teams looking to add more star power to their roster have already expressed a strong interest in adding KD to their roster. One of the aspiring contenders that may consider trading for Durant this summer is the New York Knicks. In a recent article, Grant Hughes of Bleacher Report created a list of unexpected trade ideas to get Durant out of Brooklyn. These include a hypothetical blockbuster deal that would enable the Knicks to acquire him from the Nets. In the proposed trade scenario, the Knicks would be sending a trade package that includes R.J. Barrett, Obi Toppin, Evan Fournier, 2 2023 first-round picks, a 2025 first-round pick, and a 2027 first-round pick to the Nets in exchange for Durant. Trading a young player with massive potential like Barrett would be a tough decision for the Knicks. Still, it's something that they might consider, especially if it means acquiring a player of Durant's caliber. The Knicks have long been interested in adding Durant to their roster. When he became an unrestricted free agent in 2016 and 2019, the Knicks made substantial efforts to add him to their roster. Durant alone may not make the Knicks an instant title contender in the Eastern Conference, but adding him to the core of Julius Randle, Mitchell Robinson, Jalen Brunson,
After a loss in the second round to the Dallas Mavericks, the Phoenix Suns' season came to a disappointing end. They won a league-best 64 games but were unable to make it back to the NBA Finals. In the aftermath of the postseason, the Suns have made it known they do not plan on signing young starting center DeAndre Ayton to an extension. Ayton is just 23 years old and only 1 year removed from reaching the NBA Finals. While the Suns choosing not to keep Ayton may come as a surprise to some NBA fans, the price tag to keep him in Phoenix would be hefty, and Suns owner Robert Sarver is well known for his reluctance to dip into the luxury tax. Because Ayton is a restricted free agent, and most teams would not have the cap space to sign him outright. The most likely route out of Phoenix for Ayton would be through a sign-and-trade. After the off-season dust has settled and most free agents have landed on their new teams, Ayton remains a free agent. The exact cause of this could be one of many reasons. Kevin Durant notably requested a trade out of Brooklyn, and thus some teams may be waiting to see where he falls before making another major move. Ayton also plays a style of basketball that is more reminiscent of older bruising centers that dominated the paint and lacked shooting ability. However, at only 23 years of age, I believe the upside of DeAndre Ayton is much higher than anything he has accomplished this far in the NBA. Regardless of the reason, Ayton remains available, and I believe there is one team in particular that should take the leap and trade for the young big man, the Dallas Mavericks. Yes, I understand Dallas just beat Phoenix in the playoffs, and thus, just beat DeAndre Ayton. However, in the Western Conference Finals, the Mavericks' need for a true big man was on display. Andrew Wiggins and Kevin Looney dominated them on the boards, and without effective rim protectors, Golden State easily scored in the paint all series long. Dwight Powell did an admirable job starting for the Mavericks throughout the playoffs. However, at only 6 feet 10 inches, he lacks the size and athleticism needed to get Dallas to the NBA Finals. I think that adding Ayton to the roster could meaningfully address their largest area of need. He also fits Luka Doncic's timeline perfectly, and both young stars could grow into a dynamic duo together. I also feel their play styles would suit one another very well, with Doncic being a maestro of the pick and roll and Ayton serving as a rim running partner. The biggest block to obtaining Ayton, unfortunately, would be the return the Mavericks are able to offer. The Mavericks do not have the ability to sign Ayton outright, thus they would have to send something to Phoenix in return. The best package Dallas can offer would look something like this. I imagine the trade package would have to resemble that of Rudy Gobert or DeJounte Murray. The Mavericks have no one player who could fill the salary and would be desirable enough for an Ayton swap. So instead, Dallas could use the contracts of Bertans and THJ to make the money work, and then add draft compensation to sweeten the deal. If they are willing to pay such a price, I truly believe that Ayton and Luka could grow into one of the better duos in the entire NBA. Both players in their young NBA careers have already reached impressive heights, but together, both at only 23 years old, the sky
Utah Jazz fans are stuck in limbo right now after rumors exploded earlier this week that team executives are now open to listening to trade offers for All-Star Donovan Mitchell. After dealing away Rudy Gobert in a blockbuster trade to Minnesota, moving Mitchell would signal Utah's intent of exploding the team and rebuilding from the ground up. While Jazz fans wait on eggshells to learn of Mitchell's fate, the rumor mill has cranked out another incendiary morsel. Bleacher Report's Jake Fisher floated the possibility of the Los Angeles Lakers trading Russell Westbrook to the Jazz if certain stars in the NBA universe were to align. If Donovan Mitchell is ultimately moved, and the Jazz are just kind of a wasteland of young picks or young players and draft picks, there has been increasing talk around the league about teams wondering if the Jazz would be a potential landing spot for the Lakers to send Russell Westbrook, where they could potentially get Patrick Beverley and other salary back, said Fisher. I'm not saying that's been discussed. I'm not saying it's likely to happen, but in theory, if the Jazz in this rebuild, who just want picks, can get 1 or 2 picks from the Lakers to get an expiring contract and buy Russell Westbrook out, it seems like a scenario people around the league believe to at least be plausible. In the blockbuster deal for Rudy Gobert, the Jazz received 4 future first-round draft picks and 1 pick swap. And it appears that will also be the case in any deal for Donovan Mitchell. Early reports indicate that the Jazz is looking for a boatload of draft picks from any team. If the Jazz does indeed move Mitchell, they will also be open to trading every other veteran on the roster, likely for a draft pick. In fact, it goes a bit further too.